Syrian Presidency condemns Israeli airstrikes on presidential palace. The Syrian Presidency has strongly condemned the Israeli airstrikes that targeted the vicinity of the presidential palace, describing them as a dangerous escalation against Syria's sovereignty and a threat to its security and unity. In an official statement, the presidency called for a united international stance in support of Syria in the face of Israeli aggression. It also urged all internal parties in Syria to commit to dialogue and cooperation, noting that security agencies are conducting investigations to hold those responsible for the attacks accountable. The presidency further stressed that Syria will not compromise on its sovereignty and security, and will defend the rights of its citizens by all available means. From Damascus, political analyst Nour Al-Din Al-Baba joined the broadcast to provide his insights. He explained that Israel aims to achieve two main objectives through these strikes. Firstly, to isolate the Druze community in Syria from its national context and use it as a buffer zone to prevent border violations, thereby exploiting it to advance its broader plans to divide Syria. However, Al-Baba emphasized that the Druze community is a core part of Syria's national fabric and plays a vital role in rebuilding the country. Secondly, he pointed out that these airstrikes come amid Israel's internal political crisis, and the issue of the Druze is being politicized domestically. Israel, he claimed, does not have the welfare of any Syrian community in mind, but is rather trying to provoke sectarian division to weaken Syria further. Syrian media had earlier reported the sound of reconnaissance aircraft flying over Damascus hours after Israel launched its first strikes near the presidential palace, claiming it was to protect the Druze. A joint statement by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz said the attack was intended to send a clear message to the Syrian regime. The Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs also condemned the Israeli airstrike near the presidential palace in Damascus, reiterating its firm rejection of all Israeli violations against Syria's sovereignty, security, and stability. The ministry stressed the urgent need to halt Israeli breaches of international law, both in Syria and across the region, warning of the growing risks of violence and extremism triggered by such actions. Later in the program, Al-Baba returned to discuss the Syrian Druze community's stance. He stated that the community remains committed to the Syrian state, citing recent agreements in areas like Sana'a and Jaramana, where locals have cooperated with government institutions and security forces. Hundreds of fighters from Suwayda factions have joined the General Security and the Ministry of Defense. Plans are underway to expand the security presence in the Suwayda province to ensure stability and unity. When asked about the potential for international protection for Syria against Israeli attacks, Al-Baba noted that Saudi Arabia's condemnation could influence Israel's calculations, given the kingdom's regional and global influence. He stressed that Israel's actions threaten not just Syria, but the broader Arab national security, calling Saudi Arabia's stance honorable and supportive. Al-Baba concluded by affirming that the Syrian government protects all components of society, including the Druze, and that fears among some groups are being exaggerated by isolationist elements aiming to divide the nation. He warned that external powers, especially Israel, seek to manipulate these divisions for their own interests, but cooperation between the government and local leaders is continuing to build a unified Syrian state. In a related development, following days of tension and clashes, the situation in Suwayda has taken a new turn. Syrian media reported that the General Security Directorate has approved the enlistment of 700 fighters from local factions into its forces. These individuals are expected to be deployed across Suwayda and at the province's entry points. Additionally, over 1,500 fighters have reportedly submitted applications to join the General Security Forces, with expectations of forming a new military brigade under the Ministry of Defense specifically for Suwayda. Meanwhile, Al Arabiya's correspondent reported that Syrian army forces had deployed around Jaramana in the Damascus countryside to prevent disturbances, with security forces bolstering their presence in the city.